The evening air was cool as Jasmine drove down the quiet suburban street, her mind still buzzing with the chemistry equations she'd been studying at the campus library. At 19, she was in her sophomore year at college, working hard to maintain her scholarship. The radio played softly as she made her way home, looking forward to a hot meal and maybe an hour of her favorite show before bed. The flashing red and blue lights appeared out of nowhere in her rearview mirror. Jasmine's heart immediately started racing. She carefully pulled over to the side of the road, her hands beginning to tremble slightly. She'd been pulled over once before when she was 17. And even though that stop had been uneventful, she knew the statistics. She knew the stories. She knew that for someone who looked like her, a simple traffic stop could turn into something much worse. She rolled down her window and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. Her phone sat in the cup holder, and she thought about reaching for it to record but decided to wait. Better to keep her hands visible. 2 officers approached her car, one on each side. The taller one, a man in his early 40s with a stern expression, came to her window while his partner stood near the passenger side. "License and registration," the officer said without any greeting. His tone wasn't friendly, but it wasn't openly hostile either. Just cold and professional. "Yes, sir," Jasmine said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "Can I ask why I was pulled over?" The officer's expression hardened. "License and registration first. We'll discuss that after." Jasmine's hands shook as she reached for her glove compartment. "I'm reaching for my registration," she said clearly, remembering everything her father had taught her about traffic stops. "Move slowly. Announce everything. Be respectful but know your rights." She handed over her documents and the officer studied them with a flashlight. His partner circled around to stand behind him, both of them now on the driver's side. Something about having both officers on one side of the car made Jasmine's anxiety spike even higher. "Do you know you failed to signal when you changed lanes about half a mile back?" the first officer said. Jasmine's mind raced. She always used her turn signal. Always. Her father had drilled that into her head since she first started driving. "I'm sorry, officer, but I believe I did signal. I'm very careful about that. Are you calling me a liar?" The officer's voice had an edge to it now. "No, sir, not at all. I always use my signal. Maybe you didn't see it." "Step out of the car!" The words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. "What? Why?" "I gave you my license and registration." "What did I do wrong?" "Step out of the car now!" The officer's hand moved toward his belt and Jasmine felt her blood turn to ice. "Am I under arrest?" "What's the charge?" Her voice was getting higher, panic creeping in despite her efforts to stay calm. "You're being non-compliant. Exit the vehicle." "I'm not being non-compliant. I'm asking what I did wrong." Jasmine could hear her own voice breaking. She thought about her phone in the cup holder. She needed to record this. People needed to see what was happening. She reached for her phone, moving slowly, her hand shaking. "I'm just getting my phone to..." Before she could finish the sentence, the officer reached through her window. "Don't reach for anything," he shouted. "It's my phone. I'm allowed to record this." Jasmine pulled back, but the officer's hand was already inside her car, fumbling for the door lock. "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting. Don't touch me." Jasmine's training, her father's careful instructions, everything flew out of her mind as pure fear took over. The officer got her door unlocked and yanked it open. Jasmine's phone tumbled from her lap onto the ground. "Get out now." The officer grabbed her arm and pulled. Jasmine, still buckled in, felt the seatbelt dig into her chest and neck. She tried to unbuckle it with her free hand, but the officer was pulling too hard, too fast. "I'm buckled. Let me unbuckle," she screamed. The second officer joined in now, reaching across to help his partner. Between the two of them, they got her seatbelt unlatched and dragged her from the car. Jasmine's knee hit the doorframe, sending a sharp pain up her leg. She cried out, "Stop resisting arrest!" "I'm not." "I'm not resisting." Jasmine's voice was raw with terror and confusion. "What arrest? What had she done?" She'd asked simple questions, reached for her phone to exercise her legal right to record. How had this become this? Her feet barely touched the ground before she felt herself being pushed forward, down toward the pavement. She tried to catch herself, but with both officers holding her arms, she had no control. Her face scraped against the rough concrete as they forced her down. "Please, you're hurting me," she sobbed. She could taste blood in her mouth where she'd bitten her lip. The full weight of one officer pressed into her back, his knee digging between her shoulder blades. She could barely breathe. "Put your hands behind your back." "I can't." "You're holding them." This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. She was a college student, an honor student. She'd been driving home from the library. How was she face down on the street with two grown men on top of her? The cold metal of handcuffs bit into her wrists. One officer yanked them so tight that Jasmine felt her circulation cut off immediately. White-hot pain shot up her arms. "Please, they're too tight." "Please." Nobody listened. Through her tears, Jasmine could see people starting to gather. A woman across the street was standing in her doorway, phone raised. A man walking his dog had stopped on the sidewalk, also recording. At least someone was seeing this. At least there would be proof that she hadn't done anything wrong. "What's your name?" one of the officers demanded. "Jasmine." "Jasmine Wilson," she managed to choke out between sobs. "Who do we call?" "My father." "Please call my father." She gave them the number, praying he would answer, praying he could make this stop. She didn't understand what was happening or why. All she knew was that she needed her dad. They hauled her to her feet and her legs nearly gave out. The pain in her wrists was unbearable. Her face stung where it had scraped the ground. Her knee throbbed. But worse than any physical pain was the humiliation of being marched toward the police car in handcuffs, while neighbors watched and recorded. As they pushed her head down and shoved her into the back seat, Jasmine caught a glimpse of her own car, door still open. Her textbooks visible on the passenger seat. Her phone lay on the ground where it had fallen, screen cracked. Just 20 minutes ago, she'd been worrying about her chemistry exam next week. Now she was under arrest, though she still didn't know for what. The police car pulled away from the curb, and Jasmine could only pray that her father would answer his phone and somehow make sense of this nightmare. The fluorescent lights in the police station were harsh and unforgiving. Jasmine sat in a cold metal chair, her wrists still aching from the handcuffs that had finally been removed. Her face stung where it had scraped the pavement, and she could feel her knee swelling inside her jeans. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the confusion and fear swirling in her mind. She'd been processed like a criminal, fingerprinted, photographed, her belongings taken and cataloged. Her phone, with its cracked screen, sat somewhere in a plastic bag with her wallet and keys. She kept replaying the traffic stop in her head, trying to understand what she'd done wrong. Asking questions wasn't a crime. Recording police wasn't a crime. So why was she here? A female officer led her to a holding cell. The clang of the metal door closing behind her made Jasmine flinch. She was alone in the small space, and that was somehow worse than everything else. Alone with her thoughts, with her fear, with the reality that this was actually happening. She thought about her mother, who would be worried sick when she didn't come home. She thought about her chemistry exam, now the least of her concerns. Mostly she thought about her father. She needed to call him. They'd said she could make a phone call. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice hoarse from crying. "I need to make my phone call, please." It took another 20 minutes before someone came. A sergeant older than the officers who'd arrested her unlocked the cell and led her to a phone mounted on the wall in a small room. He stood nearby, arms crossed, watching her. Jasmine's hand shook as she dialed the number she knew by heart. It rang once, twice. "Please answer. Please, Dad, please answer. This is Director Wilson." Her father's voice was clipped, professional. He was clearly in the middle of something important. "Dad." The word came out as barely more than a whisper, and then the tears started again. "Dad, I need help." The change in her father's voice was immediate. The professional tone vanished, replaced by concern and alarm. "Jasmine? Baby, what's wrong? Where are you?" "I'm at the police station, the one on Oakmont Street. Dad, they arrested me. I don't know why. I didn't do anything wrong." The words tumbled out between sobs. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" There was something dangerous in her father's voice now, something Jasmine had rarely heard. "They threw me on the ground. My face, my wrists. Dad, I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening. Listen to me very carefully, sweetheart. Don't say anything else to anyone. Not one word. Do you understand? I'm on my way right now. I'm leaving this second." "Okay," Jasmine whispered. "I love you. You're going to be okay. I promise you." There was a pause, and then her father's voice changed again, becoming cold and hard. "Put whoever's in charge on the phone, now." Jasmine held out the phone to the sergeant. "He wants to talk to you." The sergeant took the phone with a slightly annoyed expression. This is Sergeant Matthews. Yes, sir, your daughter is, Yes, she's... His expression began to change as he listened. The color started to drain from his face. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Oh my God. Jasmine watched in confusion as the sergeant's entire demeanor transformed. His posture straightened. His hand holding the phone began to shake slightly. Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Right away, sir. He hung up and stared at Jasmine with wide eyes as if seeing her for the first time. I need to get the chief. Right now. He practically ran from the room, leaving Jasmine more confused than ever. What had her father said? She knew he had an important job with the FBI, but she'd never seen anyone react quite like that to hearing his name. Within minutes, the police station seemed to come alive with nervous energy. Jasmine could hear raised voices, rapid footsteps, doors opening and closing. She sat in that small room, still not understanding what was happening, but sensing that something had shifted dramatically. The door opened again, and this time it was a man in a full uniform with stars on his shoulders, the police chief. Behind him was Sergeant Matthews and another officer Jasmine didn't recognize. Miss Wilson, the chief said, and his voice was careful, almost gentle. I'm Chief Patterson. I understand we need to review what happened during your traffic stop. Am I under arrest? Jasmine asked, her voice small. The chief exchanged glances with the other officers. Let's get you out of here first. Come with me, please. They led her to an office much nicer than the holding cell. The chief gestured to a comfortable chair. Please sit down. Can we get you anything? Water? Coffee? Jasmine shook her head, bewildered by the sudden change in treatment. 20 minutes ago, she'd been in a cell. Now the chief of police was offering her coffee? Miss Wilson, I need to ask you some questions about what happened tonight. But first, I want you to know that your father is on his way. He should be here within a few hours. What did he tell you? Jasmine couldn't help asking. Everyone's acting so different now. Chief Patterson cleared his throat uncomfortably. Your father is Director Raymond Wilson, Deputy Director of the FBI. I have to admit, we weren't aware of who you were when you were brought in. The pieces started clicking together in Jasmine's mind. Her father's job had suddenly made everyone nervous. But that made her angry rather than relieved. So you're treating me better now because of who my father is? The chief looked uncomfortable. I'm treating this situation with the seriousness it deserves. It should have been serious from the beginning, Jasmine said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. I didn't do anything wrong. I asked why I was being pulled over. I tried to record the stop. Those are my rights. They're everyone's rights, not just the rights of people whose fathers have important jobs. Chief Patterson's jaw tightened. I understand your frustration, Miss Wilson. That's why I need to review what happened. I need to see the body camera footage and dash camera recordings from Officers Hartman and Sullivan. So those were their names. Hartman and Sullivan. The men who'd pulled her from her car and thrown her face first onto the pavement for asking questions. They're being called in now, Sergeant Matthews said quietly from the doorway. Jasmine watched as the chief pulled up footage on his computer. She didn't want to relive it, but she couldn't look away. There she was, hands on the steering wheel. There was her voice, shaking but polite, asking why she'd been stopped. There was Officer Hartman demanding her license. And there it was, the moment everything went wrong, her reaching slowly for her phone. Hartman's hand shooting through the window. Her screams as they dragged her out. The chief watched in silence. His expression grew darker with each passing second. When the footage ended, he sat back in his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. This is bad, he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. This is really bad. There was a knock at the door and 2 officers entered. Hartman and Sullivan. They looked annoyed more than anything else, like they'd been called in from something more interesting. Chief, what's this about? Hartman asked. We filed our report on the traffic stop. Non-compliant driver, resisting arrest, standard procedure. Standard procedure? The chief's voice was dangerously quiet. You watch this footage and tell me what part of throwing a teenager face first onto the pavement is standard procedure. Hartman's confident expression faltered slightly. She was reaching for something. We had reason to believe she was reaching for her phone, which you can hear her announce clearly on the audio. A phone, Hartman, not a weapon. A phone that she has every legal right to use. Sullivan spoke up. Chief, with all due respect, she was being difficult. She questioned the stop. She refused to exit the vehicle. Questioning a stop is not illegal. The chief's voice rose. Asking why you're being pulled over is not a crime. And she didn't refuse anything. She asked questions, which is her constitutional right. The two officers exchanged nervous glances. Hartman crossed his arms defensively. Who is this girl anyway? Why are we getting called in here in the middle of the night over a routine stop? Chief Patterson stood up, his full authority evident. This girl is Jasmine Wilson. Her father is Deputy Director Raymond Wilson of the FBI. And in a few hours, he's going to walk through that door and want to know why his daughter was assaulted during a traffic stop. Jasmine watched as the color drained completely from both officers' faces. Hartman's arms fell to his sides. Sullivan actually took a step backward. We didn't know, Hartman stammered. If we'd known who she was. That's exactly the problem, Jasmine interrupted, her voice steady now despite the tears still on her cheeks. It shouldn't matter who I am. It shouldn't matter who my father is. What you did was wrong, no matter whose daughter I am. The room fell silent, and in that silence, Jasmine realized something important. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Her father was coming, and when he arrived, there would be consequences. Real consequences. Not just for her, but maybe, just maybe, for all the other people who'd been treated the way she had but didn't have an FBI director for a father. The chief's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression tightened further. That's the mayor. And I've got 3 missed calls from the DA's office. Word travels fast. Outside the office window, Jasmine could see the first hints of dawn breaking through the darkness. It had been the longest night of her life. But as she sat there, surrounded by nervous officers and a police chief who finally understood the magnitude of what had happened, she felt something new growing alongside her fear, anger. Not just for herself, but for every person who'd ever been treated like she had. Every person who'd been pulled over for nothing. Every person who'd had questions met with violence. Every person who didn't have a powerful father to make the police department panic. This was just the beginning. The sun had been up for 2 hours when Raymond Wilson walked through the doors of the Oakmont Street Police Station. He'd driven 4 hours straight from Washington, D.C., making a trip that should have taken 6. His suit was still crisp, his tie still perfectly knotted. But his eyes carried something that made everyone in the station stop what they were doing. Chief Patterson met him at the entrance. Director Wilson, I'm Chief. Where is my daughter? Raymond's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. She's in my office, sir. She's safe. She hasn't been charged with anything. We're releasing her into your custody immediately. Smart choice. Raymond didn't slow down as he walked past the chief, somehow knowing exactly where to go, despite never having been in this building before. Officers stepped aside as he passed, creating a path. When Jasmine saw her father appear in the doorway, she broke. All the strength she'd been holding on to crumbled, and she ran to him like she was 6 years old again. Raymond wrapped his arms around her, and for a long moment he was just a father holding his hurt child. I've got you. He whispered into her hair. You're safe now. I've got you. Then he pulled back and gently tilted her face toward the light, examining the scrapes on her cheek. His jaw tightened as he saw the bruises forming on her wrists. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Colder. Who did this? Chief Patterson stood in the doorway. Officers Hartman and Sullivan conducted the traffic stop. I want to see them, now. It wasn't a request. Sir, they're in the briefing room. But perhaps we should discuss. There's nothing to discuss yet. Chief, I want to see the men who put their hands on my daughter. The chief led them down a hallway to a larger room where Hartman and Sullivan sat at a table, both looking like they wanted to be anywhere else in the world. A police union representative sat with them, a thin man in an expensive suit who stood up when Raymond entered. Director Wilson, I'm Attorney Mitchell from the Police Benevolent Association. I'm representing Officers Hartman and Sullivan. I think we should all take a breath here, and Raymond held up one hand, silencing him. His eyes were fixed on the two officers. Stand up, he said quietly. Both officers stood, though Sullivan looked like his legs might give out. Raymond walked closer, and Jasmine watched her father study both men with an intensity that made even her uncomfortable. He was using what she called his FBI face, the expression he wore when he was reading people, cataloging every nervous tick, every tell. My daughter is 19 years old, Raymond said, his voice still dangerously quiet. She's an honors student. She's never been in trouble with the law. She was driving home from the library. Can either of you explain to me why she ended up face down on the pavement with your knee in her back? Hartman opened his mouth, but the union attorney cut him off. Director Wilson, my clients don't have to answer. I wasn't talking to you. Raymond didn't even look at the attorney. His eyes stayed locked on Hartman. I'm giving you a chance to explain. Take it. She was non-compliant, Hartman said, but his voice lacked confidence. She reached for something while we were conducting a traffic stop. We had to secure the situation. She reached for her phone, while announcing that she was reaching for her phone, which is her constitutional right. Raymond's voice was getting quieter, which somehow made it more terrifying. Let me tell you what I think happened. I think you pulled over a young black woman for a minor traffic violation. Maybe one she didn't even commit. I think she asked questions which made you feel disrespected. I think you decided to teach her a lesson about not talking back to police. Am I getting warm? That's not... We don't... Sullivan started but couldn't finish. I've been in law enforcement for 26 years, Raymond continued. I've seen it 1,000 times. You thought she was nobody. Just another kid you could push around. But here's the thing, gentlemen. My daughter is somebody. And more importantly, every person you pull over is somebody. They're all somebody's daughter, somebody's son, somebody's parent or friend or neighbor. The union attorney tried again. Director Wilson, these accusations are inflammatory and... Accusations? Raymond's voice rose for the first time. I don't need to accuse anyone of anything. I've seen the body camera footage, the dashcam footage. I've seen the videos that bystanders took that are already all over the internet. Do you know what's happening right now outside this building? Chief Patterson shifted uncomfortably. Sir, we have a situation with media and protesters. You have a situation? Raymond turned to face the chief. Chief Patterson, let me explain your situation. In the next hour, the FBI field office is going to call you. They're going to inform you that a formal civil rights investigation has been opened. Not because my daughter is my daughter, but because the evidence suggests a pattern of behavior that needs to be examined. The chief's face went pale. A pattern? I made some calls on my drive here. Had some people pull data. Want to guess how many excessive force complaints Hartman and Sullivan have between them? Raymond pulled out his phone and read from it. 17. 17 complaints in the last 5 years. And want to guess what percentage of those complaints came from Black and Hispanic drivers? The silence in the room was deafening. 100% Raymond answered his own question. Every single one. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Either minorities in this town are uniquely prone to being non-compliant, or there's a problem with how certain officers conduct traffic stops. Those complaints were investigated, the chief said. But he didn't sound confident, were they? Because according to what I'm looking at, most were dismissed. A few resulted in written warnings and none resulted in any serious discipline. In fact, Officer Hartman received a commendation last year. For what, I wonder? Outstanding community policing? The sarcasm in Raymond's voice was cutting. Jasmine watched all of this unfold with a mixture of pride and discomfort. She'd never seen her father in full FBI director mode before. It was impressive and a little frightening. Dad, she said softly, touching his arm. Raymond's expression immediately softened when he looked at her. The steel melted away and he was just her father again. Yeah, baby? Can we go home? Please? Of course. Of course we can. He turned back to Chief Patterson. We're leaving now. My attorney will be in touch about filing a formal complaint and a civil lawsuit. The FBI's investigation will proceed independently. And Chief, I'd suggest you start looking very carefully at your department's policies and practices, because this isn't going away. As they walked out of the police station, Jasmine could see what her father had meant. The small parking lot was packed with news vans, cameras, and reporters. Beyond them, a crowd had gathered, many holding signs. She could read some of them. Justice for Jasmine, Stop Police Violence, and Black Lives Matter. Oh my God, Jasmine whispered. How did this happen so fast? The videos went viral overnight, Raymond said, his arm protective around her shoulders. Millions of views. You've become a symbol, honey, whether you wanted to be or not. A young woman in the crowd caught sight of them and started chanting, Justice for Jasmine. Others picked it up and soon dozens of voices were calling her name. Jasmine felt overwhelmed. Yesterday, she'd been worried about a chemistry exam. Today, she was at the center of a national controversy. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to go home. I know, Raymond said gently, but sometimes things happen that are bigger than what we want. Those people out there, They're not just angry about what happened to you. They're angry about what's been happening to them, to their families, to their communities for years. You just became the face of it. As they reached Raymond's car, reporters surged forward with microphones and cameras. Director Wilson, will you be pursuing federal charges? Jasmine, how are you feeling? Will there be a lawsuit? Raymond held up his hand, and surprisingly, the crowd quieted. He looked at the cameras, and Jasmine could see him making a decision. My daughter was assaulted during a traffic stop for no legitimate reason, he said, his voice carrying across the parking lot. She's hurt, she's traumatized, and she shouldn't have to be. But she's also lucky. She's lucky because her father has resources and a position that forced people to pay attention. That shouldn't be what it takes. Justice shouldn't depend on who your parents are or what job they have. He paused, and Jasmine saw something in his face she'd never seen before. Anger, yes, but also pain. Deep personal pain. I've spent my career in law enforcement because I believe in justice. I believe in protecting people. But I also know that the system I've dedicated my life to has failed too many people who look like my daughter. That ends now, not just for Jasmine, but for everyone. This department is going to be investigated thoroughly. And if we find what I think we're going to find, there will be changes, real changes. He opened the car door for Jasmine, and she slid inside gratefully. As they drove away from the police station, she looked back at the crowd, at the signs, at the reporters still filming. Dad, she said quietly, what happens now? Raymond reached over and squeezed her hand. Now we fight. Not just for you, sweetheart. For everyone who didn't have a father who could make people listen. We make sure this means something. We make sure it changes something. Jasmine nodded, leaning her head against the window. She was exhausted, hurt, and scared. But underneath all of that, something else was growing. A determination to make her father right. To make sure that what happened to her would be the last time it happened to anyone in that town. The road ahead was going to be long and difficult. But for the first time since those police lights had appeared in her rearview mirror, Jasmine felt like maybe, just maybe, something good could come from this nightmare. 3 weeks had passed since the traffic stop that changed everything. Jasmine sat in her childhood bedroom, her laptop open in front of her, staring at article after article about her own life. It felt surreal, like reading about a stranger, but the bruises on her wrists had faded to yellow, and the scrape on her face was healing. The emotional wounds were taking longer. She hadn't gone back to college yet. Her professors had been understanding, letting her complete assignments remotely while she dealt with everything. But everything had become so much bigger than she'd ever imagined. Her phone buzzed for the 100th time that day. Another interview request. Another message of support from a stranger. Another hate message calling her a liar, saying she was playing the race card, saying she deserved what happened. She'd learned to delete those without reading them all the way through. Knock, knock, her mother said, opening the door without waiting for an answer. Claire Wilson had taken 2 weeks off work to be home with Jasmine, something she rarely did. Honey, there's someone here to see you. A few someones, actually. Jasmine looked up, confused. I'm not doing any more interviews, Mom. I told Dad. It's not reporters. Well, you should just come see. Curious, Jasmine followed her mother downstairs. In the living room, she found 5 people she'd never met before. 3 women and 2 men, ranging from their 20s to their 60s. They all stood when she entered, and there was something in their expressions that made Jasmine's chest tighten. Hi, she said uncertainly. I'm Jasmine. We know, said one of the women, probably in her 40s with kind eyes. I'm Patricia. I wanted to meet you because of what happened to my son. She pulled out her phone and showed Jasmine a photo of a young man, maybe 17 or 18, with a bright smile. This is Devin. 3 years ago, he was pulled over by Officer Hartman. Devin asked why he was being stopped, just like you did. Officer Hartman said he was being disrespectful. By the time it was over, my son had a broken wrist and a concussion. Jasmine felt her stomach drop. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. We filed a complaint, Patricia continued, her voice steady but sad. It went nowhere. They said Devin had resisted arrest, that he'd gotten aggressive. But I know my son. He's gentle. He wouldn't hurt anyone. The complaint was dismissed, and Hartman got to keep his badge. An older man spoke up next. I'm Gerald Thompson. 5 years ago, Officer Sullivan pulled me over for a broken taillight. I'm a veteran. Served in the Army for 20 years. I know how to follow orders, how to keep calm under pressure. But Sullivan had me on the ground in less than 3 minutes, all because I asked to see his badge number. I filed a complaint too. Nothing happened. One by one, they all told their stories. Different years, different circumstances, but the same two officers. The same pattern. People pulled over for minor violations or no violations at all. Questions met with aggression. Force used when no force was needed. Complaints filed and ignored. "Why are you all here?" Jasmine asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "Because of you, they're finally listening," said a younger woman named Keisha. "When it happened to us, nobody cared. We were just regular people. No FBI director father, no viral videos, no national news coverage. We were invisible. But you made us visible again." "The FBI called me last week," Patricia said. "They're reopening Devon's case. They're reopening all of our cases. They're looking at every traffic stop Hartman and Sullivan conducted in the last 7 years. And it's not just them," Gerald added. "They're investigating the whole department. Looking at traffic stop data, use of force reports, everything. Because you spoke up, because your father pushed back, they're finally doing what they should have done years ago." Jasmine felt tears welling up. "I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry you all had to go through that alone." "Don't apologize," Keisha said firmly. "You didn't create this problem. You just happened to be the one who finally made people pay attention. That's not your fault. That's on them." After they left, Jasmine couldn't stop thinking about their stories. She called her father, who was back in Washington, but in constant contact with the FBI field office handling the investigation. "Dad, I just met 5 people who were hurt by the same officers who hurt me. 5 people whose complaints went nowhere." Raymond's sigh was heavy through the phone. "I know, sweetheart. The investigation has found 17 more. 17 people who filed complaints that were either dismissed or resulted in meaningless disciplinary action. And those are just the ones who bothered to complain. We think there are dozens more who never came forward because they didn't think anyone would believe them. How did this happen? How did these officers keep their jobs? A lot of reasons. Police unions that protect officers even when they shouldn't. Departments that care more about defending themselves than admitting mistakes. A system that makes it incredibly hard to hold bad cops accountable. And honestly, because most of the victims were people of color from working-class neighborhoods. People without power, without resources, without someone like me to make noise on their behalf." Jasmine was quiet for a moment. "That's not fair. No, it's not. But that's why this investigation matters. That's why we can't let this go. Not just for you, but for everyone." The investigation moved forward with surprising speed. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division got involved. Data analysts went through 7 years of traffic stops, and what they found was damning. Black drivers in the town were pulled over at 3 times the rate of white drivers, despite making up only 20% of the population. Use of force during traffic stops was employed against black drivers 5 times more often than white drivers. The local newspaper, which had initially run a defensive piece about the officers, published a front-page apology and a deep investigation into the department's practices. Community members who had been afraid to speak out before started coming forward with their own stories. Town hall meetings became heated forums. The police chief tried to defend his department at first, but the data was undeniable. Citizens demanded answers. Why had complaints been ignored? Why had officers with clear patterns of misconduct been allowed to continue working? "We followed protocol," Chief Patterson kept saying. "But that just made people angrier." "Then your protocol is broken," someone shouted at one meeting Jasmine watched on the news. "If your protocol allows officers to brutalize teenagers and face no consequences, then the protocol is the problem." The police union held a press conference, with Attorney Mitchell claiming the officers were being unfairly targeted. Officers Hartman and Sullivan have served this community for over a decade. They've made thousands of traffic stops without incident. Cherry-picking a handful of complaints out of thousands of interactions is not a fair assessment of their service. Jasmine watched that press conference with her mother, and she felt her anger rising. A handful? They hurt 17 people. 17 that we know of. How is that a handful? Her mother squeezed her hand. Some people will never admit when they're wrong, honey. But that doesn't matter anymore. The truth is out there. People can see it now. And people were seeing it. The hashtag Justice for Jasmine had evolved into a broader movement, demanding police accountability in the town. Local activists, many of whom had been fighting these issues for years, suddenly found themselves with mainstream support and media attention. Jasmine received a call from one of these activists, a woman named Brenda Cole. who had been organizing in the community for 15 years. "I want to thank you," Brenda said. "Not just for speaking out, but for not staying silent after. Some people in your position would take the settlement money and disappear, but you're still here, still fighting. That means something." "I don't feel like I'm fighting," Jasmine admitted. "I mostly feel overwhelmed. That's okay. You're 19 years old. You shouldn't have to carry this weight. But the fact is you are carrying it, and you're doing it with grace. Those people who came to see you, Patricia, Gerald, Keisha, they told me they left your house feeling heard for the first time in years. That's powerful." 2 months after the traffic stop, the investigation results were made public. The FBI's report was devastating in its findings. Systemic bias in traffic stops, inadequate oversight of officer conduct, a culture that protected problematic officers rather than holding them accountable, 18 separate civil rights violations that warranted federal intervention. Officers Hartman and Sullivan were officially terminated. Not just suspended or put on leave, fired. Criminal charges were filed: assault, violation of civil rights under color of law, and filing false police reports. But it didn't end with just 2 officers. The report recommended that the entire police department be placed under a consent decree, meaning federal oversight for at least 5 years, mandatory training on implicit bias, body cameras that couldn't be turned off, an independent civilian review board with real power to investigate complaints, a complete overhaul of use of force policies. Jasmine watched the press conference where these changes were announced. She sat between her parents on the couch, her father's arm around her shoulders. "You did this," Raymond said quietly. "Not just me. You. By refusing to be silent, by meeting with those people who came to your door, by letting the world see what happened to you. You made this possible." "We all did it," Jasmine corrected. "Patricia and Gerald and Keisha and all the others. They were fighting long before I ever got pulled over. I just happened to be the one who finally got people to listen." Her mother wiped tears from her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, baby. And I'm so sorry you had to go through this to make it happen." "Me too," Jasmine said honestly. "But if something good comes from it, if other people don't have to go through what I went through, then maybe it was worth it." That night, Jasmine couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about all the people who had shared their stories with her. All the pain, all the injustice, all the years of being ignored and dismissed. She thought about Devin with his broken wrist, about Gerald the veteran who just wanted respect, about all the others whose names she'd learned. She opened her laptop and started writing. Not for a class assignment, not for the media, just for herself. But as she wrote, she realized this was something she wanted to share. Her story, in her own words, not filtered through reporters or investigators or her father's press conferences. Just the truth. Raw and honest and real. About being scared, about being hurt, about being angry, but also about finding strength, about community, about the responsibility that came with privilege and power. When she finished, the sun was coming up. She read through what she'd written and knew it was right. This was her voice, her story, and she was ready to tell it. 2 years had passed since that night when Jasmine's life changed forever. She stood in her college auditorium now, wearing a cap and gown, waiting to give the commencement speech for her graduating class. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her notes, but it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The auditorium was packed. Her parents sat in the front row, her father beaming with pride, her mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. But scattered throughout the crowd were other faces that meant just as much. Patricia was there with her son Devin, who had become one of Jasmine's closest friends. Gerald Thompson sat with his wife, both of them smiling. Keisha had driven 3 hours to be there. And in the back, Brenda Cole, the activist who had fought for change long before Jasmine's name ever made headlines, gave her an encouraging nod. When Jasmine's name was called, the applause was thunderous. She walked to the podium, taking a moment to look out at all those faces. Some were classmates who had supported her through the hardest time of her life. Others were strangers who had become family through shared trauma and shared hope. 2 years ago, she began, her voice steady, I was a different person. I was a sophomore who thought the biggest challenge in my life was going to be organic chemistry. I had plans, dreams, a clear path forward. And then, in one night, everything changed. She paused, looking down at her notes, then decided to speak from her heart instead. I was pulled over for a traffic violation I didn't commit. I asked questions, which is my right. I reached for my phone to record, which is also my right. And for exercising those rights, I was thrown to the ground, handcuffed so tightly I lost feeling in my hands, and arrested. I was terrified. I was hurt. And I was confused because I genuinely didn't understand what I had done wrong. The auditorium was completely silent now, even though most people there knew her story. Hearing her tell it in her own words carried a different weight. The officers who hurt me that night had done the same thing to at least 17 other people before me, probably more. They had a pattern of targeting people of color, of using excessive force, of treating questions as threats, and for years nothing happened to them. Complaints were filed and ignored. People spoke up and were dismissed. The system protected them instead of protecting the people they were supposed to serve. Jasmine gripped the podium, her voice growing stronger. But here's what I learned through all of this. I learned that I was incredibly lucky. Lucky because my father had a position that forced people to pay attention. Lucky because someone recorded what happened. Lucky because I survived with only bruises and scrapes when others weren't so fortunate. And I learned that luck shouldn't be what determines whether you get justice or not. She looked directly at Patricia in the audience. After what happened, people started coming forward. People who had been hurt the same way I was hurt. People who had tried to speak up before but were ignored. And meeting them changed my life. They taught me that this wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was about a system that needed to change, and it was about all of us working together to change it. The applause started, but Jasmine held up her hand gently, asking for quiet. The officers who hurt me were fired. They faced criminal charges. They were convicted and sentenced to prison time. But that's not the victory I'm most proud of. The real victory is what came after. The Department of Justice placed our local police department under federal oversight. They implemented real reforms, mandatory bias training, body cameras that can't be turned off, an independent review board run by community members, new use of force policies that prioritize de-escalation. She smiled. And it was genuine. And those reforms, they've spread. 12 other police departments in our state have voluntarily adopted similar policies. 3 neighboring states have passed legislation based on what happened in our town. The conversation about police accountability has changed. And people who were ignored before are finally being heard. Jasmine's voice grew softer, more personal. I changed my major after all this happened. I was going to be a chemist. Now I'm graduating with a degree in civil rights law because I realized that my life's work isn't in a laboratory. It's in continuing the fight that people like Brenda Cole started long before I was born. It's in making sure that what happened to me, what happened to Devin and Gerald and Keisha and so many others, happens less and less until hopefully one day it doesn't happen at all. She looked at her father, and they shared a moment of understanding. My dad told me something right after this happened. He said that justice shouldn't depend on who your parents are or what job they have. He was right. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Every person deserves to ask questions without fear. Every person deserves to make it home safely after a traffic stop. That shouldn't be too much to ask. The applause was building again, but Jasmine had one more thing to say. To my fellow graduates, especially those who look like me, I want you to know something. You have power. Your voice matters. Speaking up is scary. It's exhausting, and sometimes it feels like you're shouting into the void. But people are listening. Change is possible. It's slow, it's hard, and it's frustrating. But it's possible. And it only happens when we refuse to be silent. She took a deep breath. I didn't want to become a symbol. I didn't want to be at the center of a national conversation about police brutality and racial justice. I just wanted to drive home from the library. But sometimes life puts us in positions we never asked for, and we have to decide what we're going to do with them. I decided to use my position, my privilege, and my pain to push for something better. Not just for me, but for everyone. Jasmine looked out at the audience one more time. So here's my challenge to all of us as we leave here today and go out into the world. Don't be a bystander. When you see injustice, speak up. When you see someone being treated unfairly, record it, report it, stand with them. Use whatever privilege you have, whatever platform you're given, to lift others up. Because change doesn't come from one person or one incident. It comes from all of us deciding that we're not okay with things as they are, and we're willing to work to make them better. The standing ovation started before she even finished her last sentence. It went on for minutes, people cheering and crying and celebrating, Jasmine stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed by the response but also feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. After the ceremony, Jasmine was surrounded by well-wishers. Her parents hugged her tightly, both of them emotional. Her father pulled back and looked at her with so much pride it almost hurt. "You did good, baby girl," he said, his voice thick. "You took something terrible and turned it into something meaningful. I'm so proud of you." Patricia came up with Devin, who had grown taller and was about to start his own college journey. "Thank you," Patricia said, hugging Jasmine. "Thank you for giving us our voice back," Devin nodded. "I'm going to study criminal justice," he said. "Because of you, because of what you did. I want to be part of making things better, too." As the day wore on and people slowly filtered out, Jasmine found herself sitting on the steps outside the auditorium with Keisha and Gerald, just talking. Not about the case or the reforms or any of the heavy stuff, just normal conversation, laughing about bad professors and good coffee shops and plans for the future. "You know what's weird?" Jasmine said. "I spent so long being angry about what happened. And I'm still angry about it. I probably always will be a little bit. But I'm also grateful, not for the trauma, but for everything that came after. For meeting all of you, for finding my purpose, for learning that I'm stronger than I thought I was." "That's not weird," Gerald said. "That's healing. That's what it looks like when you take your pain and transform it into power." Later that evening, Jasmine sat in her childhood bedroom one last time before moving to start her new job at a civil rights law firm. She scrolled through her phone, looking at the messages that had poured in throughout the day. Support from strangers, congratulations from classmates, and one message that made her pause. It was from a young woman she'd never met. "I got pulled over tonight," the message said. "I was scared, but I remembered your story. I stayed calm. I recorded everything, and the officer was professional and respectful. But if he hadn't been, I knew what to do because of you. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for fighting. You saved me tonight, even if you don't know it." Jasmine sat there for a long moment, reading and rereading that message. This was why it all mattered. Not the news coverage or the reforms or even the convictions. This. One person feeling safer, feeling empowered, feeling like they had rights that would be protected. She looked at the scar on her wrist where the handcuffs had been too tight. It had faded to a thin white line, barely visible now. But she knew it was there. She would always know it was there. And instead of trying to hide it, she'd learned to see it as a reminder of what she survived, what she fought for, and what she would continue fighting for. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her father. "Proud of you today. Proud of you every day. You changed the world, Jasmine. Never forget that." Jasmine smiled and typed back, "We changed the world. All of us together. And we're not done yet." She turned off her light and looked out the window at the quiet street below. Somewhere out there, someone was getting pulled over. Somewhere, someone was scared. Somewhere, someone was wondering if they would make it home safely.